Today, we are diving into a really profound new way to think about the most complex object we know of, your brain. We're going to connect the wild, chaotic competition of a jungle with the fast-paced energy of a stock market. And we're going to see what that tells us about our own minds. Let's see how these two worlds, which seem so far apart, actually come together to explain the very thing you're using to process my voice right now.
I know, it sounds like the beginning of a really weird joke, right? But the answer, as we're about to find out, points to this radical new theory of how intelligence itself just emerges from the bottom up, with absolutely no one in charge. All right, so our first stop on this journey is to imagine the brain not as some neat and tidy computer, but as a teeming, competitive ecosystem. Yeah, a jungle right inside your skull, where only the fittest ideas actually survive. And the core idea here has a name. It's called neural Darwinism. It basically suggests that evolution isn't just something that happened to dinosaurs over millions of years. No, it's happening inside your head every single second of every single day, in real time.
So, how in the world does this work? Well, first, your brain starts with a ton of variation. It just generates countless potential connections between neurons. Then comes selection. Your life, your experiences, they act like a filter, strengthening the connections that are useful and just letting the weak ones fade away. And finally, you get amplification. The winning neural teams get reinforced over and over again, creating these stable highways for your thoughts, your memories, and your skills.
You've probably heard this classic phrase before, and it perfectly captures that selection process we were just talking about. The more you use a certain neural pathway, say for practicing guitar, the stronger that connection gets. It literally gets hardwired into your brain.
Okay, so the brain is an evolving jungle. Got it. But believe it or not, that's only half the story. Now let's switch gears to our second analogy and see how this very same jungle also acts like a high-stakes financial market. Now this is where it gets really wild. The parallels are just uncanny. Your neurons are constantly competing for scarce resources like energy, just like companies compete for investment capital. And dopamine? Think of it like a stock price. It's a value signal that tells the whole system, hey, pay attention, this is valuable, invest more resources right here. And the entire thing, your brain, is a decentralized bottom-up network. There's no CEO neuron making all the calls, just like Adam Smith's invisible hand guides the market. And this brings us to what's called the market-mind hypothesis, which is this really cool two-way street. On the one hand, it says our minds operate like markets, with neurons trading and competing for influence. But, and this is the wild part, it also flips the script. It suggests that entire markets can behave like a single mind, with its own moods, panics, and a kind of collective intelligence that bubbles up from all those individual traders.
So we've got the brain as a jungle and the brain as a market. Two really powerful metaphors, right? But what happens when we actually put them together?
Well, it turns out they're not just clever analogies. They are actually two different ways of describing the very same underlying system. And here is the grand synthesis, the brain as an internal evolutionary market. So the big idea is this. Your brain is basically a decentralized trading floor. Little clusters of neurons act like competing firms. Value signals like dopamine tell everyone where to allocate resources. And the whole system is constantly evolving, constantly adapting to get better at surviving and thriving in the world. You know, this idea didn't just pop up out of nowhere. It's really a convergence of thinking from some brilliant minds over decades. You had Hayek back in the 50s talking about the mind as a kind of spontaneous market-like order. Then Edelman gave us neural Darwinism. Then came neuroeconomists who started modeling neurons like little economic agents. All the puzzle pieces were there, just waiting to be put together. But why? What is it that makes these two completely different systems, a brain and a market, operate on the exact same principles? Is there some kind of underlying law, like a physics, that governs both of them? Well, the answer might just be something called the free energy principle. Now, this is the deep, deep math under the hood, but the concept is actually pretty simple. It says that for any complex system to even exist, to not just dissolve into random chaos, it has one fundamental job: minimize surprise. It has to constantly make predictions about its environment and then act in ways to make sure those predictions come true. Okay, I know this diagram looks a little intense, but it's a brilliant way to see how this all works together at different speeds. So, signals from the outside world come in. That's sensory data for your brain or economic data for a market. This creates what we call surprise or a prediction error. Now look at that fastest loop on the inside. That's perception in action. Your brain minimizes surprise in milliseconds, just like a high-frequency trader reacting to new info. Then you've got that middle loop, which is a bit slower. That's learning over your lifetime. Your brain selects the winning neural pathways and your mental models evolve. Finally, on that slowest, outermost loop, the entire system evolves. We're talking genes, culture, institutions, all being selected based on how well they help build better prediction machines. It's the same surprise-minimizing engine, just running on 3 different clocks.
All right, this is a fascinating theory for sure, but so what? Why does looking at the brain through this new lens actually matter? What does it help us understand? Well, like any good scientific model, it has some huge strengths and, yeah, a few weaknesses. I mean, its biggest strength is that it unifies these massive fields of science, neuroscience, economics, biology, and it explains how you get intelligence without needing some magical CEO neuron in charge. But we gotta be careful. It might focus a little too much on competition and not enough on cooperation. And we always have to remember that it's a powerful model, not a literal one-to-one description.
But just look at the explanatory power this gives us. Suddenly, creativity makes sense. It's just the brain exploring new neural investments. Habits? Those are just the profitable pathways that got reinforced so many times they became automatic. This model even helps us understand why our biases are so hard to shake, and why entire financial markets can sometimes act like a single irrational, panicked mind. So, I'll leave you with this thought. Every single time you learn a new skill, or entertain a new idea, or decide to break an old habit, you are acting as an investor and a trader in the most complex, high-stakes market in the universe, the one right between your ears. So what's your next move?